All right, Ben, it's time for the AFC South. We're starting with the Tennessee Titans. They have picks 4, 35, 66, 101, 142, 144, 184, 194, 225. A lot of fours there. Oh boy. This is the first thing I wrote. Things are exciting here in Tennessee. Cam Ward, Robert Saleh, Brian Daboll, and a lot of money spent in free agency. We spent real dollars on the defensive line, then on the perimeter pieces of wide receiver and corner. But my biggest needs are more in the middle of my team at linebacker and interior offensive line. 4 and 35 could be good spots for both those picks. If Arvell Reese or Sonny Styles are there at 4, I'm taking one of them. If they go ahead of me at 2 and 3, then I'll add a receiver to the mix in Carnell Tate to give Ward plenty of targets. At 35, I'll look at the guards, but I need a right guard. So that would be Keelan Rutledge out of Georgia Tech, unless Pregnon or Basantis can play the right side. Those are primarily left side players in college. So moving over to the right side might be tricky. We'll check in, we'll see what they could do. But Keelan Rutledge is who we're kind of looking at 35. If they're there, I could also look at the tackles like Blake Miller and Maxi Anachor and maybe pick them to right guard for a season or play with the idea of JC Latham playing guard over on the right side instead. Or I could go Jennings Dunker out of Iowa. But 35 would also be a good wide receiver spot if I don't like my options on the line. But I feel like between Miller, Iheanacho, who I don't think are going to be there, but Jennings Dunker, and then Rutledge, and then maybe moving Basantis or Pregnon over. I think I can get a right guard at 35 that I'm going to be excited about. So 66 and 101 are ideally a wide receiver and an outside corner for me. If I can hit on a cheap outside receiver, outside player at corner to allow Alante Taylor to play a lot of snaps in the nickel, I'd love to do that. That's his best spot. Even if he has to be outside, if we're in base, because of the money he got. If we're in 11 personnel, if we're in nickel, I want Taylor to be in the slot as much as possible. But more than likely, this is going to be the best spot for a wide receiver and then go corner at 101. I think 66 is probably a good spot for slot corners, guys that are going to play on the inside. 101 are like developmental outside guys that will take a swing on. So if my top four could be Styles or Reese at 4 to play linebacker, and then say I get Dunker or Rutledge to play guard at 35, and then maybe a Brazel or a Jeremy Bernard at 66. And then at 101, maybe a Malik Muhammad or a Takario Davis. I'd be really happy with that. Those kind of 8 names, those position groups are what I'm really looking for. Then at 142, I'm looking at some centers. Matt Goldman out of Michigan State or Parker Brailsford out of Alabama. And then with 4 picks between 144 and 225, we'll look at depth for both the offensive line and defensive line. Ben, how do you feel about this plan for the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I like it. Let me go backwards here. The offensive line work, the interior offensive line work, I like that. I won't even touch the names right now that you mentioned, but I do like the fact that we're working on that interior offensive line here. And it may even take another off season, in my opinion, to
Hmm.
truly crisp up and true up that offensive line. But I feel like they have tried to work on it, and it's a work in progress. And I feel like there's material to work with without burning up your top pick, material to work with in this draft to improve that offensive line setup. So I like that a lot. I really like that. Um, Back all the way at the top of the draft was it number 4 the Titans are picking.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, grab an Ohio State player. I absolutely totally love it. Now you mentioned if Reese and Styles are both gone, then yeah, let's go ahead and pick up Carnell Tate. Let's help out Cam Ward with a legit NFL receiver there. But my preference would be Styles or Reese. Would be my preference there to add on to the Tennessee Titans. I really think they could use the infusion of talent, but also use that size and athleticism
Hmm.
mixed in there. So that would be my preference there on the top end side there. And then the wide receivers thing. Let's say Tate is not who we grab there at 4 because that's really who I would rather not grab at
Right.
4. So we still have a wide receiver need. Man, sitting there at 66, you could think about it at the 35 slot. I think you might have even mentioned
Hmm.
that, but sitting there at the 66 slot, I do feel like a number of the good wide receivers that are more coveted, kind of the first 2 tiers, will be gone. I think everybody
Hmm.
agrees on that. But there's still only so many teams that need wide receivers, right? Not all 32 teams are going to grab one, and there's a bunch of them. So are going to spread out at least through the first two rounds. I'm not sure by the time we get into the third round, they're going to be sitting there,
Hmm.
but they at least ought to be there for the top 60, 62 picks. Okay. I really do feel like that. So by the time you're at 66, there's a very good chance still, I think, one or two guys is sitting right there at that cusp. And that could be in a number of guys, right? Whoever falls. So what, is that Williamson from Clemson that falls there? Is it Jermaine Bernard who falls there? Is it Hurst from Georgia State that falls there? Bryce Lance from North Dakota State that falls there? There ought to be a couple of guys somewhere. Early third is really pushing it, I think, to get guys that you really still want, but they ought to be there. So I think that's a good chance. And if you're sitting at, because you got plenty of draft picks, if you're sitting at 66 and you're like, hey, we'd love to go shoot for Brazel
Hmm.
because we think Cam Ward can get him the ball down there,
Hmm.
um, then maybe we trade up some if Brazel's still sitting there. I don't know that he will be, but
Yeah.
if he were, you could start thinking those kinds of thoughts. So yeah, I like what we're doing here. We still have a lot of holes to fill. We really do. You, but I think we can hit those holes that you mentioned here in this draft.
Do you think we could be better off taking a receiver at 35 and then looking for alignment at 66? And maybe instead of a guard, you're getting in early on one of those centers. If instead of Dunker at 66 or a Dunker at 35, we're going with a Connor Liu at 66, getting the first center off the board, and
Yeah,
and then at 35 we get our pick of the receivers in that second
that
group.
that probably is a little bit better because I really do feel like because again, where those fishing pools going to run out,
Yeah.
I really do feel like the start of the third round, and I haven't counted yet, but man, I feel like by the end of the second round, I feel like probably seven or eight of those wide receivers are gone. I
Hmm.
really feel that way. Maybe even nine of them, depending on how it works. So yeah, I that may be the better stack because man, I at 35, I still feel like there's going to be some good receivers sitting right there, and that doesn't even touch the later group of receivers that could be sitting at 50, for instance. So,
Yeah.
um, that might be the better stack because even if you don't get, because I hate to identify one player, right? But like, yeah, I'll take him. Even if you don't get Connor Liu back there at 66 for some reason, you should still be able to get Hecht, right? One of the
Yep.
others should be
Hmm.
sitting there, I would think. So
Yeah.
that may be the better stack.
And then, because maybe the 30s would be a little, I mean, it doesn't seem like all the murmurs are Rutledge is going to be more of a top 50 guy than a later on day two guy. But maybe between Pregnon, Basantis, Rutledge, and Dunker, maybe you never know. Maybe one of them makes it to 66 or they get to 60 and you take 142 and you move up a couple spots like you were
Right,
kind of saying at
right.
receiver. Um, because 66, it feels like that next tier of wide receivers you'd rather get at the end of the third or in the middle of the third than right at the end of the second. Um, the one name that's kind of there at 66 at receiver is Antonio Williams, but he just went and got Wan'Dale Robinson, so you wouldn't necessarily want to get both those guys. Um,
Yeah,
so it
yeah,
kind of
that's a good
feels like
point.
you're either waiting until 101 or you're going at 35 for a receiver. So maybe that does make more sense, especially if you can do trenches at four with the linebacker. You get the linebacker, you get a receiver. You pick the best interior offensive lineman, whether it happens to be a center or one of those guards makes it. Um, and then if you go corner at 101 and then 142, let's say you get the center at 66. We named a bunch of guards earlier that could be there in the 140s. And then you try to go bring Kevin Zeitler back on another 1 year deal or Greg Van Roten, some like you just get a stopgap guard. That's easier to do than a stopgap center in today's NFL. Um, so that probably does make more sense. I like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not trying to rag on these guys because those discussions have long since been had. I'll say the same thing about the Titans tonight that I said about the Jets on a different show last night, and that is it's kind of it's kind of sort of hard to get a bad group of draft picks here. You're gonna get picks that most
Hmm.
people would agree are likable guys to have on your team. But what's going to be way more important for both these franchises is that these coaching staffs figure this out, that they can scheme up these guys and get it together. Because man, how often have we seen these franchises have several draft picks and get excited and it doesn't work? So a lot of pressure here on these coaching staffs to try to scheme up the talent that they're going to get because they're going to get some talented guys in the building for sure.
Listen, man, we're just podcasters doing mock drafts and stuff, man. That part isn't for us. We don't have to worry, but we just say where to pick
Not
guys,
my
and then
problem.
this is why like Omar Khan is a really popular GM in the spring in the off season because he like plays the board really well, and the mock drafters are like, oh, that was good value, or wow, they moved down here and got that guy. And then and then you look at the football field on Sundays and you're like, ah, none of this worked out the way it was supposed to up here. But again, that's not our bread and butter. Maybe we'll bridge that gap one day.
You know
Um,
what's gotta suck is to be one of the 32 best general managers in the world, but to know you may get fired and not ever get another shot at it, right? Like that's the business, right? You're so good at your job that you have maneuvered, maybe politics is part of it, but you've maneuvered your way into a top spot.
mhm.
You get paid a lot of money. You have a high profile position with a major billion-dollar franchise. And yet, because you're competing against other teams and other people who are really smart too, man, sometimes you're just out of luck, despite good moves, right? It can happen.
This is a Joe Douglas tweet. It feels like it would be the appropriate Twitter quote retweet by me there. Um, I don't even know why I picked Douglas. Probably just because he had the bad luck of getting that job with the Jets.
Yep.
Um, All right. Anyways, moving on. Houston Texans. We talked about the Texans earlier via the Vikings, but they're picking at 28, 38, 59, 69, 106, 167, 243. The needs haven't really changed much for the Texans since the D'Amico Ryan, CJ Stroud, Will Anderson era got started. We always have receivers, linebackers, and defensive backs, but could use help on the defensive line and on the offensive line. We even added David Montgomery this offseason, hopefully give a solid back to the offense, but if Detroit let him out of the building, I wonder if he's also out of juice. We made some investments in the offensive line. We swapped out Titus Howard for Braden Smith, added Wyatt Teller, and brought back Ed Ingram. Ingram and Teller were both left guards in college, but predominantly right guards in the NFL. So they could probably work out one of them playing on the left side, one of them playing on the right side. But between Smith, Ariante Ursery, and Blake Fisher, I may need one more tackle to truly get through the year and try to compete for a Super Bowl. So at 28, Blake Miller, Maxi Anachor, and Caden Proctor will be high on our board, along with defensive tackles like Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, and Keldrick Falk. At 38, I'm looking at the same positions and adding edge rusher to the list. Manuel Pregnon, Jennings Dunker, Chase Basantis, Keelan Rutledge, Kristen Miller, and a whole host of edge rushers we've already been talking about. At 59, I'll make sure to get the last one of those positions. Then at 69, looking at defensive backs. With three day three picks, I'll look to take another swing on a running back, an extra DB, and maybe a linebacker for D'Amico, who just can't help himself. They traded for Marte Mapu like a week or two ago, and I was just like, this guy just can't freaking quit, man. Any kind of linebacker he can get his hands on, he's going to do it. Um, so, anyways, ideally with those four picks in the top 70, would love to walk out with like a tackle, a guard, a defensive tackle, and an edge rusher. Just really beef up the lines, and then start looking at some defensive back and other depth after that. What do you think about this plan for the Houston Texans?
I'm really close with you, really close on it. Let me hit the defensive tackle group first because I agree they could use somebody in the middle. We even talked about it last offseason, just didn't happen, right? This defense is as scary as it gets, and I include Seattle Seahawks right along with it. I mean, people do not want to go up against this defense. It might even be better this year than it was last year, possibly. Like, this is a scary defense. If you dropped in a Peter Woods or a Caden McDonald on this defense, goodness gracious, like, this could I hate to heap on it, but if everything were to click and under D'Amico Ryans this could be a defense that could be hitting historic type ceilings. It's that freaking good. And you even mentioned adding defensive back depth there. Totally agree. If they could work that in just to kind of injury proof themselves, right? But again, I would love to add a defensive tackle here. There's really no reason they can't do that at several different levels of the draft. So
Mhm.
even if they don't go out and get a premier defensive tackle, man, there's no reason later in the draft they can't add somebody who would boost that interior uh, tone setting because man, everywhere else they're good. But the whole roster, I tell you, is scary as to how close it is to being
Yep.
Super Bowl heavy. I mean, it's really close. You basically need the offensive line that you mentioned, and I'll get to in just a second, and then you need a Stroud resurgence of some sort. It's not like he's bad, but he hasn't been crisp for 2 seasons now.
Hmm.
So something's got to work there in order for them to, but they are, if the Broncos can do it with Nix, I don't know why the Texans can't do it with Stroud, right? So
Yep.
be pushing on that ceiling. That's really close. The offensive line here, the only change I would make in this year's draft, I don't think there's many teams who are and should be looking to trade up. But if I were the Texans, I'm one team
Hmm.
that would be looking to trade up, and it would be to get into that realm of tackles. You mentioned there's nothing wrong with the guys you mentioned. There are guys that are going to go high in that range, but we've talked about it. There's another group sitting up there. So,
Yeah.
and again, I won't touch left right here, but if we could get somewhere up into that Lomu group, into
Yep.
that Freeling group, man, I would
Hmm.
love to put Freeling on here.
Hmm.
Who's the top guy? Malino is too far up. He won't be
Yep.
available under any scenario. If for some reason Fano were to fall, and while I don't think it will happen, it's certainly possible based on rumors and whispers, right?
Hmm.
If any of those three guys were to be sitting there maybe at 20, that's within reach.
Yeah.
And being that O line is such a desperate need here, I would jump on that to make that happen. So that's a big one for me. But then sitting there at 38, if we don't have to give up 38 as part of the trade, I love that group of guards you mentioned. That's
Hmm.
probably a sweet spot, 38 for guards.
Yep.
So if we can double dip tackle, maybe we stay at 28 and grab whatever tackle we get, and then we add in, the guard at 38. I do feel like that's a great sweet spot right there for guards. So I'm with you all the way. But Houston is like one of the few teams I would be heavily exploring trading up because our
Yeah.
roster is pretty close and tackle is such a big need right now.
Yeah, I really should have bookended the Vikings and Texans conversation with saying my main priority is trading up to 18 with the Minnesota Vikings, 28, 38, whatever else it would take. Um,
There you go. That's perfect, isn't it?
it's a weirdly constructed group, man, because they technically did enough that a lot of people have been like, they've addressed the offensive line. But
Hmm.
like they're paying 12 million bucks to a lot of people and just like that's not a number you really want to be at on your offensive line. Like maybe one guy who's a really good swing tackle, right? Who could play
Yeah.
both sides, can play 4 games at a time before like coaches see enough on film and they're like, this is how we're going to attack him and we'll draw up a perfect game plan. And then he goes back to the bench for 4 games and then, oh, he's got to play 2 games on the other side. Like, that's who you want to give $12 million to? Not your like presumed starting right guard, but also your starting right tackle. Like, that's like the bottom basement of paying veteran starters.
Okay.
And that's just
Yeah.
not, and you're doing that 3 times
Yeah.
with Teller, Ingram, and Braden Smith. Now, Teller's a little unique, right? 2-year deal for a guy in his 30s trying to win a Super Bowl. And like one of the years is fake. So it's really like a 1 year for 12, which is what Zeitler and Van Roten are essentially doing. But like Ingram got like a 4 for 48 or 3 for 36. Braden Smith got like a 2 for 24. So like it's
Hmm.
just it's just not and then Arion Territory, like a second round left tackle. Okay, that's not always what you want to do. But look, Patrick Paul, like for the Dolphins, he looked better in year two.
Right.
So like Ursary, I think has the tools. I think he could do that. Um Center, practice squad Patriot player who just knows the OC and got through the year last year and looks like he's gonna be the guy again this year. So like maybe. And then Blake Fisher failed second round pick, but like he's your swing tackle. And then Trent Brown,
Hmm.
longtime veteran, is back for 5 million bucks. So like, okay, there's the thing there. Jarrett Patterson, a former mid round. So they have a lot of guys that have like mild investments in them. So it's like a
Right.
kind of expensive, but not overly expensive group. And a group with some names, but not a lot of talent you feel really strongly about. It's a weird offensive line. So yeah, with how good the rest of the roster might be, Houston probably could sit there and pretty confidently say, we have 2, 4, 6, 7 picks. If we can take 28 and 38 and a pick next year and get 18 and 120, right? Bridge that gap from 106 to 167, something like that. Three picks for two, a pick next year, but move up 10 spots and get a Lomu or a Freeling. Um,
Yeah.
that would clean. I mean, it wouldn't clean a lot up, but it would make the group better for sure.
Yeah, it would. Listen, if I'm not trying to knock Stroud here. If they had a top 8 or 10 quarterback, a top 5 quarterback that was producing at a high level to go along
Mm,
with this defense, I'd feel a lot better about patchwork put together offensive line because there are capable type guys here. But it's like every one of them's got some kind of a question about will they be healthy or will they be able to step up and be talented enough. So I'd love to add to that, not just for this season, which mainly for this season, but for years ahead. I'd love to really get that built back up. So, um, man, I hate to let another season go by in which the offensive line is part of the reason that we didn't push on past here.
yeah. Yeah, if only all of these like mid-tier guards were being added to, I don't know, an all-pro caliber left tackle. That would be really good for them. Anyways, the Indianapolis Colts picks 47, 78, 113, 156, 214, 249, 254. We made the commitment to our offense this spring by re-signing Alec Pierce and extending Daniel Jones. So now it's the defense that still needs an identity. In the first three drafts as Colts GM, Chris Ballard drafted five starting linebackers: Anthony Walker, Shaq Leonard, Zaire Franklin, Bobby Okereke, and EJ Speed. Now, none of those guys remain on the team, and there's a huge hole at linebacker. So that's going to be a
Mm.
big need for us. That's going to be a priority. Ballard said, I want a linebacker. We're gonna go find one. We also do need an edge rusher, though, to play across from first round pick Leatu Latu, who we still aren't sure if he's a number one or a number two. But at defensive tackle, we have good starters, but they're just getting older, some interesting young pieces, and then a couple other veterans at the end of the depth chart. So that's fine. We like our corners when they're healthy. Sauce Gardner, Travaris Ward, Kenny Moore, Justin Whaley, Makai Blackman, and Cam Taylor Britt. That's a good corner room. But all of those guys have dealt with injuries over the last year or two. And even with Nick Cross leaving in free agency, Cam Bynum is a solid piece at one safety spot. So with no first round pick, we have to be smart about our plan. But at 47, I'm looking at linebacker. While I think the edge rusher well is going to run dry soon after that pick, like we've been talking about, we have too big of a need at linebacker. And the group of linebackers here, we haven't talked about a lot about it tonight, but it's also just a good linebacker group, especially right here. So I want to take advantage of that, considering how much of an identity linebacker usually is for us. So CJ Allen, Anthony Hill Jr., and Jacob Rodriguez, those are our priorities at 47. If all three are gone, then we'll look at the edge rushers and then come back to linebacker at 78 with guys like Jake Golday, Kyle Lewis, and Josiah Trotter. If we get our linebacker at 47, we'll look at age at 78. Denai Dennis Sutton, Joshua Joseph, Velty Overton, Romello Height, and Kieran Crawford. Overton is especially enticing because with his size, I think he could also play a bit of defensive tackle. So considering we have some aging guys there, get a guy with a little inside-outside versatility might be nice. At 113 and 156, we'll be looking at wide receiver and defensive back depth. And with the three late picks in the 200s, we'll look at the offensive and defensive lines. Ben, how do you feel about this draft plan for the Colts?
Yeah, I like it. I'm trying to pull up something else on the computer here as well, but I'll pull that back up in a second. I may just have to work off my brain, which that's not going to go too well, but we'll do the best we can. So,
What is it?
listen,
Let me look it up. Let me look. What were you looking up? I'll look it up.
linebackers at the 100 to 200 range
Okay.
in this
Yeah,
draft.
I'll get you those
That's
names.
the group. But I'll get to that in just a second. So starting off at your linebacker at the 47 or so pick, it's a good group there that you mentioned, the Anthony Hill, the C.J. Allens, the Rodriguez. They won't all three be there, but there's a very good chance one of them could be sitting there because. Man, I've talked about edge rushers moving up in this draft and wide receivers getting gone in clusters here in the first two rounds.
Yep.
We've talked about offensive tackles moving up here. Somebody's going to drop, and there's
Right.
a chance it's a very good linebacker group that kind of sort of gets pushed back a little bit, right? And that doesn't mean that people don't have a low opinion of those particular linebackers. It's just, man, we got to have a tackle. We
Right.
really can't get one later. We
Hmm.
got to have an edger. We really can't get one later. it's not even necessarily trying to premium position this thing. It's just supply and demand. We can't get them later, you
Hmm.
know? So
Hmm.
there's a chance these linebackers do slip at least one of them to 47. So I like that right there. And then the linebacker group at 100 to 200. So there's a really good cluster, most of them around the 150 range. But let me rattle off some names. It depends on which board you pull up. Aiden Fisher from Indiana, Tarian York from Texas A&M, Jack Kelly from BYU, Lander Barton from Utah. There's a kid from Arizona State whose name I can't remember at the moment.
Keyshawn
Go check
Elliott.
out the Yes, go check out the film on him and tell me that's not a guy to get excited about a starting linebacker sitting back there in the middle of your draft.
Is that the other
Um,
converted safety? Was he the other kid that was a safety early
that
in his
part I
career?
cannot remember. Yeah, so I apologize,
I'm gonna
but
look it up. That's
just
something I heard about someone.
yeah,
I think it was him.
thank you. I appreciate it. There's even a couple of more names I'm missing because I don't have them in front of me here.
Harold
I'll
Perkins from LSU. Maybe Deontay Lawson from Alabama. Bryce Botticher from Oregon. Caleb Alarms Orr from TCU. And then you named all the rest of them.
Yeah, but Betcher's the other one there from Oregon as well. But yeah, he'll probably end up being a little bit just a little bit later. But anyway, if that's not enough linebackers to choose from right there in the middle of that group, I don't know what is. It's a great year to be looking linebacker. There's no reason teams like the Colts. Isn't it frustrating as a GM to have drafted that many linebackers and they don't work out, or they're just not part of the team for financial reasons, one or the other, right?
Right. Because they
Gotta
all
gotta drive
started
you crazy.
at least, they all spent at least 2 years as a starter for them. And like Anthony
Yeah,
Walker's bounce around, but he's a guy that starts for a year for one team and then goes to another team and starts. Shaq Leonard, obviously, all the injuries completely derailed his
yeah,
career. But Zaire Franklin, that was their guy for a long. He was the one that stuck around.
right.
Bobby Okereke stuck for a while, but he was a long-time starter for the Giants. EJ Speed
Yep.
stuck with them for 2 years once everyone else kind of filtered out. Went and was essentially a starter for the Texans last year and is now somewhere else. He ended up somewhere else, but yeah, like 3 years, just bang bang. This would be me drafting offensive line. Like I would just hit it hard for a few years and love those guys, and then eventually they all filter out one reason or another, and you're like, all right, time to start over.
It's a beautiful group. Now I'll tell you, Perkins and Lewis from Pittsburgh. If you like smaller guys who are faster and make
Mm,
plays, but may not hold up over the course of a season in terms of collecting 800 to 1,000 snaps, that's your guys. But that whole other group I mentioned sitting there at 150, pick 150, give or take, right? Give or take 30 picks.
yeah.
That's a group right there that they have size, they can hit, they are smart. They are green dot guys that should be able to eat up a lot of snaps. I mean, the whole freaking group right there. So they're not standout athletic people, but they hold up athletically, right? Man, if you're looking for guys like that, there's no reason you couldn't even add two of them, to be honest. Although most teams aren't going to do that. So it wouldn't bother me if the Colts, grabbed an athletic guy at 47 and then double dipped for a more of a captain of the team, green dot
Hmm.
kind of a guy back there at 150 level, wherever they're at 156. So yeah, that's a great thing to do right there. And then the other positions you mentioned are just fine. But the linebacker thing really did stand out there for all the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah, and like I mean, I even think that like that difference that you're talking about, you can pick your flavor at 47 with those guys. Like Anthony
Hmm.
Hill is just your like point and shoot run and now he's very the thing I like about his IQ is I think he's really good at like sifting through the trash in the run game. Like even though he's much bigger than CJ Allen, if you watch him back to back, you're like Anthony Hill's like a 6'4" old school buck linebacker, and he's just not. He gets eaten up by blocks too, but he's very good at sifting through the trash, and so once the play's happening, the IQ is there. Um,
Yeah.
but CJ Allen is a little bit of both. Jacob Rodriguez is not the same athlete or size as those guys, but very instinctual. So you can get across the spectrum of what they're gonna look for there. And then with this next group, we'll talk about a guy that I like that's completely the other way. But yeah, there's a lot of flavors at linebacker, and it just feels like with all the names, all the talent they have on the front and on the back end, if they really need to get that identity going, like think about it, Lou Anarumo is the defensive coordinator. With those Bengals teams, when he had that 2, 3 year window and they were pretty good, who was setting the identity? It was Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson in the middle, right? Yeah, they had some, Trey Hendrickson getting the sacks, um, Jesse Bates for a little bit there, but then, just some young corners flying around, Mike Hilton in the slot. But Wilson and Pratt were the guys messing things up in the middle, and yeah, I think they're going to want to do that there at 47.
Yeah, it's a great
Anything
point.
anything else in the
It's hard
Colts?
to get off the linebacker conversation here because
Yeah.
man, months ago we hit linebackers pretty hard and they've kind of faded from
Yeah.
conversation, right? Which I totally understand.
Yeah.
Grabbing CJ Allen, who's not big, but
Mm-hmm.
athletic and tough,
Mm-hmm.
good against the run. And I think he can hold up decent in pass coverage and
Mm-hmm.
can develop further. That would be one half of the linebacking core right there. And then the other part, getting to work out at 150, if you go back and grab a little bit bigger linebacker who's
Yeah.
got the green dot captain size would be beautiful for that defense. I really like that. And then you mentioned LT Overton in there as well
Mm.
for edger purposes. Totally agree.
All right. Our final team, the final team of the war room, the Jacksonville Jaguars picks 56, 81, 88, 100, 124, 164, 166, 203, 233, 240, and 245. What a year. What a year. Our GM and head coach pairing really turned things around last season to the point that our splashy first round pick had very little impact on winning, if you really think about it. And we still had a great year. With Travis Hunter moving his primary focus to cornerback, things are starting to take shape in this Liam Cohen era. And we are going to talk more in depth about Travis Hunter switching. But for now, let's focus on the draft plan.
Yeah.
Travis Achan is gone from the offense, but we planned for that last year with the Bashal Tutin draft pick. Defensively, starters Andrew Wingard, Greg Newsome, and Devin Lloyd all left in free agency as well. The Tyson Campbell for Greg Newsome's swap allowed us to open a starting outside corner spot for Hunter because Newsome was scheduled to be a free agent this year, whereas Campbell was under contract. Um, and that's where we think Hunter has the highest ceiling and most potential impact on our room for this season, at least. Since Jacoby Myers, Brian Thomas Jr., and Parker Washington all shaped up to be a solid wide receiver trio last year, that was the decision making for that move. Our biggest hole in the starting lineup is at linebacker with Lloyd being gone. My favorite pick we could make here at 56 would be Jake Golday out of Cincinnati. He's the perfect big athletic run and hit linebacker to play next to Foye Oluokun, who's the green dot, calling things out, telling everybody where to be. Anthony Hill and Josiah Trotter and Jacob Rodriguez are also all options as linebackers that are in this range that we've talked about. But Gold Day being 6'4", long arms,
Yeah.
fast, and can hit, not very
Hmm.
instinctual. He'll stick his face in the fan as a run defender coming downhill. He's not super effective at it, but he's at least getting in there and making plays. But I could just see, just like Devin Lloyd early in his career, Oluokun still there doing it, being like, "Hey man, run that way," and Jake Olday's gonna be like, "Yes sir," and just like, "Phew, get over there and wreck somebody." Um, Let's see. The defense also needs depth up front and in the backfield. So three more picks between 81 and 100. We'll be looking at defense, DT, edge, safety, and corner. A few names across these positions I like. We've talked about already: Grayson Holland, Daryl Jackson Jr., Joshua Josephs, Malik Muhammad, Bud Clark. On day three, we have picks 124, 164, and 166. We'll use those on the remaining positions we didn't take in the top 100. Plus, look at some O-line depth and grab one of those tight ends that everyone's all excited about right now. We also have four picks in the 200s. That would give us 11 picks in total, and I'm happy to use them all. But I'm also interested in using those picks to try to move up a bit. It probably won't amount to much, but if 203 and 233 could get us from 124 to let's say 105 for a player we really like, I would do it. Like if that was like the tight end, right? If there's a tight end run happening at the end of day two, right? When we get to our pick 100, but we want to go with a corner there. But we're like, man, a lot of tight ends just went in the 90s, and we don't think the one we're gonna like is gonna last to 124. At the end of day two, at the end of Friday night, we'll call around and be like, hey, 124 with how many of these seventh rounders do we need to go get Oscar Delp or Michael Trigg or whoever? Um, Overall, we're very happy with where the roster is at. The offensive line actually has a lot of options for 2026, but we'll be sure to take someone on day three to add to the hopper because there are several guys that are going to be up for free agency pretty soon. We have our QB, our running back, our wide receivers, and a tight end, at least for this year, because Brenton Strange is also a free agent after 2026, hence the draft pick. We have edge rushers, we have corners, we have defensive tackles, and one linebacker. This draft is all about depth and then complementary pieces to those cornerstones that we already have the roster filled with. So Ben, what do you think about this final draft plan? And this one here for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, the plan is good. Now, there's actually three player names you mentioned that I just love the fit for Jacksonville. I'll get to them in just a second. But let me start with your top one, Jake Golday out of Cincinnati. Whether he goes here or whether he goes somewhere else, somebody's going to be very happy that they got a very big, strong man who can move fast down to get pressure on the quarterback. He
Hmm.
does. It's not like he has moves, but you
Right.
talk about a guy that can get on the quarterback quick if he's sitting out there at linebacker and just kind of red dogs it right. He can
Mm.
get there quick, but also a guy who played a lot of zone coverage
Yeah.
in college. It's a ton of it. You're right about his instincts. They're not the greatest. People can slip in behind him. He's not
Yep.
always the most aware, but even so, very big, very strong, got the good speed and moves around really well, and certainly can spot drop coverage very
Hmm.
well and take away these areas, right?
Yeah.
So whether Jaysville gets him or somebody else, somebody's gonna really love getting Golday here. The names that I really liked that you mentioned here were Michael Trigg, the tight end. I think that would be a fantastic
Yeah.
ad for Jacksonville. I He's got a ton of talent. It's red flag things
Yep.
that are holding him back. Most of those happened at a different school, and most of those happened more in like 23 and 24.
Hmm.
The incident that happened, I think it's what, September, October of 25, most people blamed that on the athletic director who thence got fired, you know. So
Mm.
I hate to lay that at the feet of Trigg, but even so, there are admittedly red flag concerns that are pulling him down. But man, being able to add a talent like that to Jacksonville would be fantastic. Malik Muhammad, corner that you mentioned there as part of that group, would be a fantastic add. He's got the athleticism. I don't know that he's got that pure stickiness to him as far as super tight one-on-one coverage, but he's certainly got the athleticism to challenge and make it difficult. I think that would be a great fit. And there was one more name that you mentioned right here. Grayson Halton, I think, would be out of Oklahoma,
Mm.
defensive
Hmm.
tackle, would also be a great fit right there in the middle for Jacksonville. So those were three names, man. You're not gonna get them all, but in any of those names there, I thought would just be beautiful fits for what Jacksonville wants to do.
Holton's a fun player. I really enjoyed watching him. And yeah,
Yeah,
Golday, like he's not done. He's not like a golden retriever out there just running. He knows how to use his length and athleticism to make up for the fact that he's not Jacob Rodriguez out there who just like yeah feels
right.
stuff that's happening around him. And you said it. He did it so much. I mean, he's like lined up as the slot corner essentially. And then he
Yeah,
just drops into being a middle
right.
linebacker once. But when he starts, like the play starts, and you go to find him, you're looking at the middle of the field for the 6'4" linebacker. And it's like, no, he's the giant guy
He's not
covering the
there.
5'10" slot wide receiver, you know. Um, but then yeah, he gets out there and he's moving around and stuff, and yeah, it's not and like it even looks good because he is
Right.
athletic, because he's a natural mover, because he's got experience doing it. He just doesn't have the feel to and like that's Devin Lloyd didn't have the feel either, and then he got better at it and better at it, and he's not he didn't win all pro this year or make all pro this year because he's a great coverage linebacker. He's just a very good all around linebacker. And I
Hmm.
could see something similar for Golday.
Yeah.
All right. That's the end of the war room, but let's stick with Jacksonville for a minute and talk about Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways from Travis Hunter kind of switching over to be a primary corner this year? And then from a draft perspective, like thinking about Jacksonville moved up, spent a first round pick and some other additional draft picks to get him to go from 5 to 2 to get Travis Hunter. Um, how do you feel like what do you think that says about the experiment to try and trade up for this guy to play both sides and how it all went down in his rookie year?
it when you trade up, you're certainly kind of sort of hoping for more than that, right? You're hoping
Mhm.
this guy can kill it on one side of the football and also do some fun stuff on the other side, right?
Mhm.
Which is incredibly rare at the NFL level. Goodness gracious, it is. Those are unicorns, and I mean golden unicorns with
Two horns. Yeah.
with yes, with two
Is that a
horns.
different? Would that be a
Exactly.
different thing?
But
Unicorn
probably
with
yes.
a bicorn? Whatever. All right. Delete.
There's a
I'll think
reason
about
that
that.
so rarely happens is because even if you have the athleticism, you've also got to have a certain amount of stamina. You've got to have a certain amount of just insane ability to pick up things at this highly processed NFL level. And it's not to say that it can't happen in the future. It's just for now that's what they've decided to do. So there's no question about it. The hype for him and the trade up for him would be with the mindset, hey, he can do things on both sides. Maybe he's an 80-20 player, 80% one
Hmm.
side, 20% on the other. It's just, man, it's so hard to do. So that part of it hasn't worked out. Now, at a certain point, it's kind of like the adults in the room have to take over, and that's Liam Cohen basically. But that entire coaching staff have to be like, hey, based on what we saw year one, where's he going to help us the most? It's right here. So let's focus in on that. Let's get him settled in on that, and then if everything's working out, maybe we can start cooking him up a few offensive
Right.
packages here. So it's mildly disappointing based on the trade up, right? That's
Yeah.
that's not what you were hoping for, but still, that's not to say he can't be the tremendous player. So it's the reality of NFL life, man. It is so freaking hard to do. That's why, man, these are some of the greatest athletes in the world, and by the time you mix in their physical toughness and their mental toughness, boy, they're just right there at the peak with other athletes around the world. And still, it is hard for somebody to do this. So, that's life in the NFL.
So when I saw this, my initial reaction was kind of what was happening throughout the season, right? Where it was Parker Washington's playing more than Hunter and he's playing well. Brian Thomas Jr. has his ups and downs through the year, and then they trade for Jacoby Myers, and it's like, ooh, well, this is done, right? This experiment is just over. And then you
Mm-hmm.
start seeing some of the reporting digging into the quote from Gladstone, the GM, and then you actually see the video surface. And it is truly like I don't have the exact quote, but it was basically like he's going to shift the majority of his focus to corner now. So the phrase we kept hearing last year was like major in one thing, minor in the other, right? To do both.
Mm-hmm.
And you look, and he only played in 7 games last year, but it's clean how it kind of worked out. Actually, he played 2/3 of the available offensive snaps in the games he played, and 1/3 of the available defensive snaps across the games he played. So that makes
Wow.
a whole, right? That makes a one. Um,
Yes.
but now it's like, okay, if just on the surface level we hear what Gladstone's saying, and now it's going to be 2/3 defense, 1/3 offense. Now that's very literal. I don't think that's going to be it. I do think, and based on what they did in the offseason so far, I think it supports. He's the starting outside corner. And then, like you said, we'll sprinkle in as much offense as makes sense. I think even the report said like he could have 10 to 12 specialty package plays a game, right? My first thought was
Yeah.
also like, can you make him a returner? Like, if you want to take advantage of that skill set of him having the ball in his hands,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to put him on offense, make him a weapon in the return game with the way the return game works now. Um, but then as I was thinking about it and everyone was freaking out about the trade and, oh, this is abject failure, even though I always said last year through the process, I think he'd be an all pro corner. I would put him there first. And at the end of the day, if you get an all pro corner and you trade it up, yeah, you probably didn't want to trade 2 first round picks for an all pro corner, but like, whatever,
Right.
we're here. You got him. He's an all pro corner. It is what it is. That's not the worst outcome. But then I was thinking, what if it's not the flexibility and ability to play both sides all the time every year? That's enticing because, yeah, like you said, that's probably just not possible now. But what if it's year to year? This is a guy that can be an all-pro corner or let's say a Pro Bowl wide receiver, and it just depends on where your roster is.
Hmm.
Gladstone and Bowen can walk into every offseason and evaluate their entire roster. They can say, okay, here's where we ended the year. Here's our free agents. Here's the strengths and weaknesses of this upcoming draft. Where do we want to play Hunter next year? That sounds pretty freaking valuable. That's pretty cool to
Right.
have a player who can play both positions. And even if it's never going to be 90% of the snaps on both sides of the ball every year, but that flexibility to say, oh, this year we need him at receiver. All right, here we go. Let's put him at
Yeah.
receiver. Or think about when the Patriots had, was it Troy Brown? Troy Branch? Now I'm going to sound like I'm not as old as I am that I can't think of this, that I can't say this. Played basketball against this guy at one point, actually. That's another story. Um, and I don't remember all the times, but yeah, the guy that like throughout his career was a wide receiver, was a cornerback, vice versa, and then just like, oop, here's the playoffs. Get out there, man. You're not coming out. You're not coming off the field. Um,
Right.
a comparison I'm more ready to make right now. Denzel Washington, remember the Titans when he just reads the list of the top eight actors, I mean top eight players from Remember the Titans, and said, "You're playing both ways. You're not coming off the field." And he's got his quarterback playing corner because he's like, I just need the best players out on the field at all times.
Yep.
If Jacksonville's going to have that kind of flexibility with Hunter, that's still more valuable than just a really good player on one side, and it's different than what we thought. But I just thought I thought that was interesting. Just like, all right, this year, Hunter, where do we need you? All right, you're gonna be receive. Oh, we kept Brian Thomas Jr. for year three, but we didn't pick up his fifth year option, and we traded him. We need you back, and we uh, who'd you like? Muhammad. We took Malik Muhammad at pick 88,
Hmm.
and he was really
Yeah.
freaking good. So Hunter, for 2027, we're sticking you back at receiver full time. I think that's pretty cool.
The flexibility has a tremendous amount of value. We see that on offensive line where we talk about guys who are
Hmm.
able to move around. We see that in the defensive backfield where we talk about guys that are able to move around. We see that on the defensive line where we talk about guys that can play edge but can scoot to the interior. We see that in baseball where flexibility is huge, guys being able to move around. You see that in other sports as well. It's just so rare to see it on both sides of the football at the NFL level.
Right.
The one thing that is going to keep making it challenging, and that's why I was so pessimistic about it, I, just a few minutes ago, I mean, is in order for it to truly work and be productive at the NFL level, the being on both sides of the football, he's kind of sort of got to be a better athlete than the people he's going up against.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's really hard to do. He's an amazing athlete,
Yeah.
but to be better than the guys he's lining up across from, it's not going to happen that often, to be honest. You know, the
Hmm.
defensive backs he's going up against at the NFL level are all as fast as he is, right?
Yep. Yep.
Some of them are as tall, not all of them. But you know, when it flips over to him covering people, well, all these wide receivers can run too, and a lot of them are tall, right? So
Hmm.
that athletic advantage that he possessed in college that allowed him to do it shrinks, which means now he's got to get back to learning his footwork and
Yeah.
crisping up his catching and his
Yep.
routes and his coverage skills. It is difficult to do. So
All right, because we can't end on just such a cool player, I will say in terms of other flexible players on the Jaguars, I mocked Jordan Farmer to them in that 3 round mock, but you know who I forgot they have sitting there just waiting for his opportunity? Wyatt Milam, West Virginia, converted tackle
yes,
to guard. And we liked him last year,
absolutely,
man. And Ezra
absolutely,
Cleveland is in the last year of his deal. Patrick McCarry is they can save like 13 million in 2027 if they move on from him. Wyatt Milam, baby. Might be time for what we saw them move on from bench Walker Little and give Cole Van Lannon a random 3 year contract or whatever. Wyatt Milam. It's coming. It's gonna
yeah,
happen.
I agree. I would love.
All right.
I would expect him to get a chance at that for sure.
All right, there we go. We ended on Wyatt Milam. That felt better than Travis Hunter, whatever. All right, that's gonna do it. The NFL Draft War Room Series, presented by Box Score Network with Ben and Simon. Also, Pro Football Enterprises, Simon and Friends podcast, the Simon and Friends podcast. Um, hopefully you all are listening and watching. We have appreciated everybody on whatever network, whatever show, whatever channel, being here through the draft season. Quick programming note for this is coming out on Thursday on the Simon and Friends pod, the first edition Friday, and then Monday on Box Score Network. Um, we're gonna have stuff for you all week of the draft. So this war room discussion, other draft conversations between me and Ben are gonna be in places. Make sure you check that out. We'll have a full 2 round mock coming out on Tuesday or Wednesday before the draft. I keep forgetting. And then mine and Ben's annual over under first round preview of the draft. And then Ben and I will be back Thursday night right after the first round. We're going to react to that. That'll go up Friday morning. And then sometime the following week, we'll have big picture draft recap stuff
Yeah.
across the network and across the show. So all draft all the time, Ben. We will continue for this next week to be ready to prepare and react and analyze and report back to everybody. And thank you for all your work, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you to everybody listening and watching, wherever, however you're doing that. And we will talk to you again soon. So, everybody, thank you. Have fun and be safe out there.